Welcome to Between the Lines. This is the podcast where we go beyond job titles and LinkedIn profiles to explore the honest and unexpected journeys that shape careers in sports business. From first steps to pivotal decisions, these are the personal stories you don't usually hear. I'm your host, Omar Zarad, and together we'll uncover the careers behind the game. Today, I'm delighted to have with us Ramy Camel-Toueg. So Ramy is a senior manager in brand communications at Adidas, focusing on sports like football. So you may see his work at the intersection of Adidas and Manchester United or Liverpool or Al Nassr in Saudi. I'll tell you how we met. It was back in 2011 or 2012, if I'm not mistaken. Yet again, I was lucky because I was surrounded by a very generous man, always willing to help. I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and sharing the same culture and passion for sports, it made us connect super fast. I was organizing a sports conference and I invited him as a speaker. He came, and next thing you know, you would find us playing football together in Montreal, meeting up again in Manchester for fun outings, or being invited at Old Trafford. So thank you, Ramy, for being generous and being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the time as well.
Let's dig in. As usual, I think the first question, I'd like to hear about something that wouldn't show up on your LinkedIn or that your network would never guess.
Um, so when I grew up in Dubai, I was there since the age of 5. At the time, it was still an evolving city. And oddly enough, I grew up in the realm of loving to be around basketball, and I wanted to play basketball as much as I could. And it turned out that there was a basketball clinic held at one of the local clubs called Al Wasl Basketball Club. And the person who was giving the clinic was none other than basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I attended that clinic. I think I was must have been like 8 or 9 years old. I was very enthusiastic, not fully fitting into my clothes as well as I could, so shorts, baggy jerseys, dribbling up and down. And towards the end of the clinic, there was a small Q&A with the legend Kareem, and someone asked him, "Can you still dunk?" And I was standing right next to him, and he goes, "I can't, but he can," pointing at me. And
And
then
you were 8 or 9?
yeah, yeah, and he picked me up, and they gave me a ball, and brought me close to the rim, and I dunked the ball, and it was like one of the happiest moments of my life because that was the closest I ever got to the rim. But it was really cool being around, such an accomplished legend, looking at him with my innocent eyes, saying, "Wow, I hope I get to be that tall that day."
Do you still have pictures or videos of that?
There is only a newspaper clipping of him being there, but not me in it. So I just have that moment of like, oh, he came to that clinic, and I can tell that story. So people actually always tell me, I don't believe you. So that's the story.
Wow, and that's pretty cool. And that's also, I guess, related to your love for basketball on top of football.
100%.
Nice, nice. Another quick question before getting into the rookie years. When you were a kid or a teen, what did you want to become when you grew up? Or did you already know that you wanted to work in sports?
I think sports is something I gravitated towards just because as a young boy in Dubai, and it's the 90s. There wasn't much on TV, so you're always out with your friends, and the weather's always very appealing in that regard. So I was playing all the sports, racket sports, baseball, basketball, not so much football because it's interesting because I was very absorbed by everything Americana, everything American culture. It was the height of the NBA. Michael Jordan was really killing it, so I was really into that. And so sports was very much a second nature to me. But when people would ask me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said an actor. And I think it's because, again, growing up, I had family in the US and in France, and so whenever my parents would come back from their trips, they would bring back these VHS tapes of American movies, French cartoons, American cartoons. So I was glued to the TV watching these tapes, sometimes over and over, watching the same episode of Dragon Ball Z or a classic Rambo movie or anything. So I was like, "Oh, I'd really like to be an actor." I like the idea of being very outgoing, energetic. So yeah, that was what I said at the time. Little did I know that I wanted to eventually gravitate towards something that gave me so much emotion, which is sports.
Yeah. And did you ever end up getting acting classes or improv?
I did do so I was, my first school before I switched over to the American high school system was, the French lycée program, and, in French lycée, they tend to get you to memorize a lot of things, and we did theater. So I would learn, Molière and these other, pièces de théâtre, as they say, and, so I remember doing a couple of those when I was, like, 10, 11, 12, really enjoyed it. It was fun. But then again, when you grow up, I guess, some formative years, 10 to 14, you start going into what I wanna do, what I be outside a lot, and sports just completely took over.
Yeah, yeah. So, shifting to sports and the rookie year. So, what or who maybe inspired you to become a sports business professional?
So at the time where I was in university, I was studying marketing. I come from a marketing background in the sense that my father worked in marketing, my brother worked in marketing, my older brother. Being around advertisements was something that was very common. And at the time, being an Arab kid, a lot of your family will tell you study business, study engineering, or study law, or be a doctor. But at the very least, if you're going to go into business, which is at least ranked the lowest in that whole order, go to a big firm, whether it is Procter and Gamble, a Nestle, a Johnson and Johnson. Get hired by one of those. So although I was going in that direction of learning marketing for that purpose, which is a bit corporate, I still wanted to be around sports. I just didn't know how. At the time, I was just thinking, oh, you're either a coach or you're a player, and if you're not that, you're just not around it. And then I read a book in university. I remember it was during my sophomore year, my junior year. It was a book by an American journalist called Franklin Foer, and the book was called "How Soccer Explains the World: An Unlikely Theory of Globalization."
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
Yeah, and at the time, it really charted this very curious journalist who wanted to go around the world and study what made clubs so special. Why was there a rivalry between Celtic and Rangers? What made the Ahli and Zamalek rivalry so intense? Why was Milan split between the Blues and the Reds? And so, going into every single story and going into it, he uncovered levels of culture, political representation, also representation of one's faith, and so it uncovered so many layers of culture. I was really drawn into it because there is a story behind every one of these clubs who are now these commercial giants, and I feel that I could add to that. I have a bit of an international background. I've been exposed to many cultures. Like I said earlier, I have some family who immigrated to France, to the US, and visiting them on a regular basis, I was immediately exposed to these different cultures as well. And eventually, this book literally told me soccer is the most spoken language in the world, you know? And I wanted to be around that. And given that I was learning, marketing as well, I was like, I'd love to attribute my marketing skills and, my learnings into that realm as well. It's what drew me into wanting to be in the business.
And you mentioned before, like big companies like Procter and Gamble, etc. It was also somehow connected to sports because if we talk about sponsorship, so many of these brands are connected to sports.
100%. I look back now from when I made that decision to wanna be in the industry and how the industry of football and every other sports, whether it's basketball, American football, and all the rest, how they've really embraced that level of commercialization, working with massive brands. The number of partners that every club has now is it's massive. Partnership has evolved on so many levels. It's no longer just about visibility, but how you activate them, how you create a bond which the consumer can feel emotionally attached to. If you look at, it's the club like Paris Saint-Germain, their front of shirt sponsor now is something which is immediately going to be recognizable. It is, especially for airline brands, you can see now how consumers are drawn to a certain airline just because it's on their favorite club.
Yeah, yeah.
And also how it's created a need sorry, need, like, how if you look at kits, the kit industry, which is, primarily what I've kind of gotten into, it allows also some brands to give a certain level of diversification and a different offering throughout. If you look at right now what Barcelona is doing with Spotify, they don't just carry the Spotify logo on the front. Sometimes it'll be an album that they're pushing, and it'll be only for a one-off game, and that makes that specific jersey something that's so desirable. So all that level of evolution on how partnerships work, it's gone such a long way, and it only makes you wonder where it's gonna go, especially now the fact that you have, not just the physical value that you find for the clubs, but now the digital value that you find to it too.
I think there is space for everyone. That's also the new thing compared to before, because of course there are the big brands who have more money, but now because you see that the digital assets and the inventory can be split into so many different assets that even smaller brands can gain more visibility. I think it's cool that there is room for everyone now.
100%. You're actually right. When I was living in the UK, I noticed that the football industry is so big. You could be having a drink with someone who is directly involved at the training ground, at the academy level. The next day, you find yourself meeting someone who's involved on the production level for the media. So you find yourself, especially, it's funny how you find that in the UK, you're almost 1 or 2 degrees away from someone who is working directly in that industry. And it always makes for great chat. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So your first role in sports, tell us about it. How did you land it?
so straight out of university, I was very hungry to just get involved. I remember I wanted to be doing something more at a higher level at the time. Also remember at university we had a sports association that we got involved in, pushing on the culture of football. But I wanted something a bit more, let's say, on the professional side. And at the time where I graduated, Qatar had announced that they were hosting their first major sporting event, which was the Asian Games, which is the equivalent of the Olympics, but for the whole Asian region. And it was a huge $1.5 billion investment at the time, a very big investment. I wanted to be part of it, and I had gotten in touch with someone via, I think, a family member who was handling an agency that was covering all the PR. So I did the interviews, obviously proved to them that, like, I was really excited, enthusiastic about being there. And they asked me to fly in for a 6 month, to come in for a 6 month contract to be a PR exec to help, some of the contributing colleagues. So I got to work in the media zones. I got to be part of that whole run of events. It was quite interesting. Also being exposed to what is the Asian Games. The Asian Games, they have sports in there which don't necessarily make it to the Olympics,
Yeah.
such as the Desi sport of kabaddi, which is quite interesting. They had wushu, which was, a sport that was quite interesting to watch. So being exposed to that side of it was really fun. It was my first foray into the world of professional events, and it just made me want to be part of these things
Yeah.
even more.
And when was that again? So the Asian Games?
Asian Games were in 2006, the Doha Asian Games. I still have, at the time we were given uniforms because you're part of the media, and I remember exchanging my jacket, which is a thing that many athletes do. I remember seeing someone from the team of Chinese Taipei. She
Mhm.
had a really cool jacket on, and she liked my jacket, and I was like, "You know what? We'll trade." So she gave me hers, and I still have it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like it was pretty smooth because you set yourself a goal to try to work in the industry and you identified an event. So that was pretty smooth. But was there anything that was hard about the process of finding this job, this first one, or perhaps maybe, if not with this one, with a full-time one later?
I think when you're set on what you want to do, at least from my side, you very much, if anyone has watched Naruto the anime, he would constantly say from an early point, "I will be the Hokage." I will be the Hokage of the village. He would say what he wanted it to happen, and he would almost saying out that affirmation, hoping for it to happen, but also willing for it to happen. I would say I want to work in sports, so through saying that on a regular basis to people that I knew, and that was my ambition, I got introduced. Hey, Ramy is always saying he wants to work in sports. We know someone who's there. Let's make that intro. I think the hard part was being able to take a risk into something that seems unknown. Sometimes when you're applying for jobs, you want it when you can visualize yourself doing it. But if you can't really get a sense of what that'll be, it's tough for you to then commit to it. And at the time, I remember I was interviewing for that role. I had never been to Doha in my life, and I was interviewing for another role at a bank in Montreal, a city that I spent a big part of my life in. So I felt like a part of me was saying there's the safe one with a nice, decent bank job coming straight out of university, which looks pretty cool, or you're gonna go to Doha, which is still in its developmental phase, and you're gonna do something related to the Asian Games. What's it gonna be? Who are you gonna be working with? And I was like, you know what? I want this. I want to try and do this.
Yeah.
So, and then at the same time, when you're asking people around you their advice, some of them are giving you a bit of that safe thing, like you should go for the bank. That's good for you. It's gonna keep you secure.
Yeah. Like a lot of people telling you, yeah, do this first few years in consulting or in banking, and then eventually you can switch. I
Exactly.
think that's part of what I did. So I'm not gonna make fun of that, but it's one of the other ways. The cool thing is that there are many ways to get in.
And while growth is never linear, I think the learning that I got from there with just making that decision process is if you're afraid of going in a certain place just because you're not sure, it's the fear that's holding you back, then it's more of an added reason for you to make that decision.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And something else that I would like to highlight, I loved what you said about putting yourself out there, keep talking to people, just say, hey, you know what? I love sports. I love the industry. Someday I would like to work there. Even if it doesn't happen now, at least people think of you when something pops up or just like a freelance opportunity or whatever. If you keep saying it, and I know I bothered a lot of people at EY back then when I was working there, people would think of you when something related to sports pops up.
100%. It's just like just really putting it out there, saying on a regular basis. Eventually it comes your way. So
Great. So let's talk about the clutch times now. We want to talk about some of the challenges, the big lessons. I think you started to share a few ones and, these pivotal decisions such as taking risks and trying things even if you have no security in a sense. So first, was there a moment when things didn't go as planned? A setback, a failure, or just, something that didn't go according to plan that ended up teaching you something essential or redirecting your path in an important way?
yeah. I recall I'm gonna talk about this and I think I'll make the connection there. But there was, if anyone's watched the series Mad Men, one of the main characters was a creative director. I remember him interviewing some young execs, and then he sits down and he looks at them. He goes, the first question he asked them, he goes, "Have you ever been fired before?" And that stuck with me because you're asking me, like, was there ever a pivotal moment? When I got back to Montreal after I worked at the Asian Games, I wanted to get back into sport. It was tough to find some chances within that scope, and also I wanted to gravitate towards a sport that I wanted to be a part of, so mostly football or soccer. And until that chance came, I got a great chance to work for Aldo Group, which is their headquarters are in Montreal, and I got a good chance to work in distribution, which was pretty decent. And I learned a lot about the world of retail as a result, especially working at their headquarters. So I went from distribution over to ecom and merchandising at the time where ecom was booming, and then I also worked in retail marketing, so making sure that all the POSs, all the communications in stores were good. And after I think 3.5 years there, I kind of hit a wall. I was not really happy. My performance wasn't where I wanted it to be, and happy to acknowledge it at the time. And so it came to a point where my in my mind, I was not putting in the work that really helped Aldo get to where it was, and they kinda sat me down and say, "Listen, maybe this is not working out between us." And so you can imagine as a young professional, you're like, "No, I tend to do things, good, well, and everything." It allowed me to say take a step back, say, "Alright, fine, I'm gonna leave that side." And I was when you leave a job, you kinda feel like, "Oh, man, did I give it my all?" But at the same time, I could acknowledge my heart wasn't in it. And what it did eventually do is it made me rethink and reflect on what really mattered. Do I want to be in the world of fashion, or do I want to really stick to what I really like? And don't get me wrong, I've always, in everything I've done, I've always tried to touch on trends, make them work in that regard, and that it is to give that level of flair. And I think that's also seen throughout all my work in the last couple of years, how to add more flair in fashion and stuff. So I have to thank Aldo for that. Luckily enough, coinciding with that time, the Montreal Impact, as they were called at the time, had just confirmed they got their new franchise to be part of Major League Soccer. So I remember around the cold month of November 2011, a little bit sooner actually. I went to directly to the club, CV in hand, telling them, "Listen, I want to work for you guys. I'm ready to do anything." And sure enough, they took me on my word. They said, "Okay, if this guy's ready to do anything, we need to put some butts on those seats in the stadiums." They had a new 20,000 seater that they were building as part of them going into MLS. So they put me on the phones. I was selling soccer tickets. I was making 90 calls a day, selling tickets to people all around Quebec to convince them to come watch the Montreal Impact play in Major League Soccer. So when you're making 90 calls a day, you need to be ready for a bit of rejection. What I did notice was that I was able to handle rejection pretty well. At first, your average Quebec sports fan thought that I was trying to pull them away from their beloved sport of hockey, uh, but I really wasn't. They tell me there's nothing bigger than hockey in Canada. I was like, you're absolutely right, but there's no hockey in the summer. So if you're looking for some sport, we'd love to have you at the stadium. And so, eventually they caught wind of it. It helped as well that um, the ownership at the Montreal Impact, they were also fully invested in the project, and they brought in some big names as well. Whenever you bring in a big signing, it helps to drive in a crowd. And so it was a great experience, great working for MLS as a whole, because when you work for the football club, uh, MLS operates very much like league think versus club think, like the clubs
Exactly.
in Europe. And so when you work for an MLS club, you are also open to the whole network of MLS. So we had LA Galaxy giving us calls, giving us their best practices of how to work within your market. We were speaking to the New York Red Bull. We were speaking also to other well-established teams in some smaller markets like Columbus Crew, and they would always give us, their best practices on how to really speak to the consumer, how to bring them into the stadium, different types of ticket packages. It was really beneficial. And I say beneficial also because a lot of people who work in sports in the US, they tend to in the US, you're a sports fan. You're not necessarily just one sport fan. So if you're from Chicago, you follow the Blackhawks, the Black Sox, the Bulls. We love the teams that come there. So we had experience coming in from people who had NBA experience, MLB experience, NHL experience. And what it does is you're seeing the I wouldn't the North Americanization of the European sport of football, and it was really cool because if anyone knows how to do sports and entertainment, it's the Americans, and you're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of the stuff that they've done in some of the more established leagues like NBA and the like, now being used in the rest of Europe. Using that in MLS was a great learning experience for me. I did 4 seasons with them, 3 seasons in MLS, 1 season in NASL. So I was with them for that whole season before they jumped into MLS. Great learning curve for me, and it only reinforced my desire to want it to be part of the sporting culture, sporting club as well at the same time. And yeah, forever grateful for everything that I learned with the Impact. I still have some colleagues I keep in touch with over there. Yeah, great organization.
It's funny how you also mentioned that you went there with your CV printed and got a job in sales. Back then, I think it was still a thing to print CVs. And again, as we mentioned in one of the previous episodes, like sales is a great way to start and a great way to learn as well. So
Absolutely.
that's cool.
I think for anyone who
And
wants to be in marketing, anyone who wants to be in the realm of sport, really it never is a detriment to you in any way to have a sales background. On the contrary, it'll only make you stronger and better at what you do.
yeah, and in marketing and sales in general, I mean, especially in the US and I guess Canada, people are sharing a lot. It's not a competition outside of the pitch. If you have like this new activation that worked super well, or this new digital strategy, or you name it, people are sharing with you and teaching you what they did, what worked, what didn't work, etc. So this is honestly, this is something
100%.
super important.
I remember at the time when I was working there, we were just so happy that we were in a league that had David Beckham. Now, when I speak to some of my colleagues who are still at the Montreal club, now called CF Montreal, they were so happy when they found out that Messi was coming to MLS because they knew immediately what benefits Miami will also benefit the rest of the league. And it's been super clear.
I
So
mean, you have the greatest player who played the game. I had to drop this. I had to say this, of course. Great. That was one of the big changes. So this move from Aldo to finally officially working in sports full time. Then what happened? Were there any other pivotal moments, or something that triggered you, that made you do something bold or something important that led you to where you are today?
I remember sometimes when you spend long enough in an organization, you tell yourself, I need a bit of a change to evolve further. And I needed something a bit more international. At that point, all my experience was bit part between Doha and then Canada. I was like, you know what? I'd like to have a little bit more coming from my region. So what I did was I decided to leave the Impact and go back to Dubai where I grew up to work for an agency. There was a role there that was quite interesting with some decent clients. At the time, our client, so the agency was John Walter Thompson. I think they've now changed their name since being acquired. It was really beneficial to go agency side because then you're exposed to the clients. The clients being at the time, we had Coca-Cola, we had HSBC Bank, and then we also had Nike. So it was very interesting experience working with these three different types of brands. And so I got to touch on retail banking. I got to touch on fast moving consumer goods in the form of Coca-Cola, and then obviously a brand in apparel like Nike that has such a strong impact as well. And so I pulled in, I think, 2 years with them at JWT. I made some really cool friends as well in the process, learning about that fast paced life of being agency side, pitching, the emotions that come with having to find a great a great idea, being very creative, working with creatives, accounts. It's very interesting environment working with agencies. I have a lot of respect for people who did work agency side, in fact. And then one of my friends, we talk about manifesting and talking about what it is you want to be a part of. So one of my close friends who interned at Adidas and then had a great career at Adidas, he found out about a role and he goes, "Listen, there's this role that popped up. I know the hiring manager. I told him about you, and I think you guys should at least have one phone call." So we had one phone call, and great guy. His name is Giuseppe Mele. I'll never forget him till today because he gave me a great chance. We had one conversation. What was supposed to be maybe 15 minutes lasted about 45 minutes. And he gave me my chance to say, you know what, we're going to have you come to our headquarters and work in Herzogenaurach in Germany. And I knew nothing again of where I was going. I did not know where Herzl was, how big the town was. All I knew was that Adidas, a brand that was very much grew up wearing all the time. I remember at the height of when I was enthralled about basketball, I was wearing Adidas. I wasn't wearing Jordan. I love that brand so much. And then so I had a chance to work there in digital marketing. So again, I did another facet of marketing. I went from sales to kind of project manager at the agency side on the creative end to then going straight into digital marketing, which was obviously growing a lot. Adidas usually has various categories and business units. And that category was training and sportswear. At the time, it wasn't called sportswear, it was called athletics. I moved to Germany, a fantastic organization, huge campus, about 6,000 people. You felt like you were in a world that breathed sport, you know? And so it was really great to be when you talk about strong company cultures, the company culture at Adidas, you immediately gravitate towards it if you're that type of person. And you can tell, but the ones who stay there, the majority of their careers is because they live and breathe that culture. I immediately jumped in head first, loved every single second of it, and I spent 3 years in Herzl. And luckily for me, I think it's how life offers you these types of opportunities. I was in a category, training and sportswear. You train and you carry sportswear for all other sports. I had a lot of cross-category marketing plans. We had a campaign where we would feature tennis players in our training range. We would feature basketball players in our training range. And as it would be, we would feature football players in our training range. I was lucky in the sense that I got very much exposed to the football category through my category of training, and I think it's what offered me another opportunity to move yet again, which is quite cool.
Yeah, that's a nice story. I remember back then when you're telling me about moving again, and then eventually landing in Manchester.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I'd like to talk a bit more now about the behind the game plan. The sports industry, I think, is full of myths. We often think that things go a certain way, but they don't. There are a lot of surprises. I'd like you to share with us some common misconceptions that people have about working in sports. A few things maybe that surprised you when you started working in sports or even later in your career. I think for you, working especially in merchandising and the training gear, we often think that you would be exposed to athletes a lot. So tell us about these misconceptions.
So it's very interesting, and I think especially working in sports apparel, you can choose to put a product out. Let's say it's a running product, right? If you're gonna put that product out and your audience is specifically around the lifestyle of running, you don't need to go too far in terms of working with some of your partners. You don't always need to go and work with marathon runners to put your running product out. You can put it out by working with running crews, which is a very big trend nowadays. It's like the cool thing to have a running crew. Um, I think the biggest misconception people have is that if you're at a Nike or a Puma or an Asics or anything like that, The division of football is very, very unique. It's not at all to be compared to the other divisions. And the reason why is that you have to work with football clubs, you have to work with athletes. It is the most spoken language in the world because it's the most visible sport in the world. It's seen everywhere. What Lamine Yamal wears is important. So you are exposed to athletes in that level in a different way than you are exposed to maybe other sports. And that's not to belittle any of these other sports. It's just a different dynamic, a different level of investment, different level of attention given to it. And when you're talking about a sport which is so big, and I mentioned this before when I was living in the UK in my other role, I was exposed to different people in the industry because the industry is so massive. And for example, the person who is working in production for the sport of football, they can't, even though they love football, they don't necessarily know how the agent works in the world of football. They don't necessarily know how the sports marketing manager works. So it's important to know where you sit within that industry. I'm very confident in saying when I say this, I can put out some of the best campaigns you'll ever see when it comes to kit drops. I will knock it out the park. And I say it just because I've done that. And also I've been around these things, and I'm always looking to put out the new. But I can't claim that I can tell Ruben Amorim what's the best formation to put out. That's not up to me. And so it's important for the misconception I would say that people have is that if you're working in the football industry and you know someone there, it's important to really know exactly what they do, not to really claim that, oh, just because they do that, they can set me up with the manager and they got an in with Cristiano Ronaldo for some reason. It's a very guarded industry. There is a fair level of gatekeeping, and it is based on trust. It is based on relationships. I know after my many years of experience that mine is about football marketing. Mine is about football storytelling, and that I'm not going to claim to see that I want to be a coach. Maybe I'll coach on an amateur level, but I can't go and say I'm going to be the next Ancelotti or anything like that. And I think it helps because some people I speak to many people now. I'm grateful in that sense that I've reached a point where I have some people reaching out to me who are much younger and saying I want to be involved in the industry. And sure, it's great to have that level of passion and enthusiasm, but I think it's important from the offset to say, okay, I love the industry. I know it's massive. What can I add of value within that place? I remember when I went to the Montreal club, I said, I'll work for you guys. I was hoping maybe I could be involved in the backroom staff doing something, but they put me on the phone. They put me doing sales. I stayed humble. I was like, all right, I'm going to do that and I'm going to be really good at it too. So, um, there's nothing wrong with knowing that. It's like someone who is a fullback on a team. You won't be scoring goals, but you will have a great role to play within the success of that team. You won't be the striker, you won't be the goalkeeper, but you still have a role to play within that field. So the earlier you know where you fit within that industry, the better it'll be for you and to allow yourself to become an expert in that realm. That being said, it's perfectly normal if you try something within that industry and you don't like it and you get a chance or an opportunity to move in there. But this is where I talk about how you need to manifest that, you need to display that behavior, you need to talk to the right people, and really live it, be genuine about it. Because the minute you have that disingenuine element about yourself and you're just someone who wants to climb the ranks, it it's felt, you know?
Yeah,
These are
you
these are
need to know what you don't know and what you don't like as well. And I think you mentioned the uniqueness of football. It has so many different angles, and another one as well to add to that is how international it is. Because I think it's one of the most international sports. Like in a football squad, you would see so many different nationalities. One of the perfect examples is just when you sometimes travel and you walk in a city and you see a kid wearing a random kit of another club from a different country just because a player from his country or her country plays there. So I think it's this global aspect is super important as well.
100%.
And speaking also of the misconceptions and things that are not necessarily known, what invisible work do you do that no one sees? So if someone is watching from the outside, what is it that they would never guess is part of your day to day?
Working in on my side of things, I think a lot of people, um, they tend to think that campaigns are put out almost overnight. Yeah. I was very lucky in the sense that when I was in Herzo, and I did my 3 years there, I got a great opportunity to apply for a role, to do brand communications, for Man United, one of our biggest, partners in our portfolio, a beautiful commercial powerhouse. Again, I knew nothing of Manchester. I remember going to the senior director who was hiring at the time, and I remember asking him for a coffee, And during that coffee, I knew straight away that there would be people who'd be probably in the running to get these types of roles. You often think about that. I was afraid of a certain level of, I wouldn't call it nepotism, but like favoritism, you know? So I
Yeah.
remember being the senior director, I said, listen, I'm going to give you my everything, but I just want to know that when I enter that interview, I just want a fair shot at proving that I can do this. And I think that stuck to him. He said, okay, you will get your fair shot. I got in, I won fair and square. I'm very proud to say that. Moved to Manchester, didn't know a thing about the city. I ended up falling in love with it. I ended up falling in love with United. If there was one word I could use to describe this club, I would say it's pure romance, if that's the word. And it it gave me that chance to understand more about what it takes for a machine that big to work so well. And it's not always down to one person. And that's what I've really understood. There's a misconception that people think that, oh yeah, that person is behind everything. No, man, it takes a lot more than that. It takes a village.
Yeah.
Everything from speaking to the man who would run security at Carrington, or speaking to the late Kath Phipps, who was at the reception, or just speaking to people who handled ticketing to see such a well-run club operate the way it does. That's irrespective of what happens on the field. It's really about how they put themselves out. It really takes a lot. So now being exposed to what really is the highest standard of what football comms looks like at a club that United, then now it's been a year and a half. I'm in Dubai. I'm working in football, again, still in comms, but working with other clubs who are partners of ours, who are kind of finding their feet at establishing their brands as being football clubs, even though they have a lot of heritage and history and tradition on the field. It's also about how they portray themselves off the field. Having these conversations, I came in thinking, yeah, I'm going to change things around. I found that it was less about changing things around in terms of systems, but more about changing hearts and minds internally, getting people to think the same way you did, or like those standards that you're used to. And that is a misconception I had. It's not going to be up to me, but rather making sure that the team is all working in with that level of harmony, at the same level of performance. And it's been a year and a half, I think, where we had a great year one. We're going into year two of our partnerships with some of these clubs and federations, and we now understand each other better, better modes of communication. It's these little things that really help you to put out something which you're very proud of as well. It's moments like this lately. I've been putting stuff on LinkedIn saying I'm very proud of this work that I'm doing,
Yeah.
and thanking a lot of people. And it's nice to see the fruits of your labor.
Exactly. Yeah. Seeing it coming to life is it's fantastic. Yeah. It takes a
Absolutely.
bit of time, but it's normal. You know, you have a squad or you have new colleagues. It doesn't just become beautiful from day one. Great. I wanted to ask you a bit about some sideline wisdom. You've been in the industry now for a long time. You've seen different organizations, different size. So if you could go back in time, what's one thing you wish you could tell or teach your 20-year-old self?
You know, there is a point in your career where I think at 20 years old, we still have this vision of how we're going to be. By the time I'm 30, I'm going to be here. By the time I'm 35, I'm going to be here. By the time I'm 40, I'm going to be there. I think I had completely ditched that thought process by the time I hit 32, 33, because I was nowhere near what I had envisioned at the time. But also, I was looking back, I was like, man, how unrealistic was I in setting these expectations? But when you have these expectations of where you're going to be at that age, you instantly put this level of anxiety. It's unneeded. I remember when I was putting some pressure on myself at the age of 25, 26, 27, of where I wanted to be in my career, and as I would speak to someone who was maybe in their 40s and 50s, and I remember the smirk they would give me, like, "This kid doesn't know how much pressure they're putting on themselves," and I remember them telling me, "You should relax." And so if I had advice to give my 20-year-old self, I would say, "Don't take this as seriously as you're taking it now. Don't put so much pressure on having that perfect role, that perfect job, or making anyone happy. Sometimes your parents or your family members, as much as they want you to be secure, they just want you to be secure because they care so much about you, not for anything else. And so sometimes they can look at you the sense that I need to protect this young person as much as I can. But no, I would say take bigger risks. At the time, I remember I was 20 years old. I was going to my classes, going to these business classes, and trying to be part of these business associations and unions and stuff. While I had one friend who was like, you know what, screw that. I'm gonna go to my DJing, and he just kept DJing all the time. The guy's got now 3 houses through his DJing, you know? So I that's something that I admire in the sense that that person was convinced of what he was doing. He didn't mind saying no to the system, not conforming, and it put him in a good place. So, yeah, I think that'd be the advice I'd give my younger self. Like, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Don't be that anxious kid looking to want to be there, and really do what gives you a lot of joy. And if you're good at it, make some money off it, and it'll allow you to have a bit more freedom to make those decisions that your younger self would want to be a part of. And again, learn to manifest, learn to say what you want to do, how you want to do it. You'd be surprised how many people through kindness will just reach out to you saying, "Hey, I thought about you," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. 100%. It's also something that we see more and more now. We discussed it before, but the new generations are pretty good at it, and they know better how to put barriers and limits and be a bit less anxious, I would say. Another thing in terms of advice, something that you enjoy using, is there a favorite tool or app or even a habit that you're loving right now, or change the way you work or think?
It's being talked about quite a lot, but I think now more than ever, and I don't want to be sounding like a broken record, but it is important to see how AI will play a role for you. I'm someone as a marketer who works a lot across Excel, PowerPoint, a little bit more nowadays with Photoshop. And I think once you get a good sense of how AI can support you, it'll just help you to touch on more projects than you usually do. I'm not saying that it's going to replace our jobs, but it'll make us be more productive. I can put out more ideas through. I can have slightly easier or faster campaigns or activations that I can do thanks to it. It allows me to structure my thinking a little bit better. I don't use it just to, let's say, formulate emails nowadays, right? I work with it to figure out good strategies. And then I would say, someone told me the other day, I was sending them something that I found on my For You page, and they're like, "Man, I would love to see what your For You page looks like." And it made me wonder and made me think, man, I'm kind of, I've been on Instagram so much, I've been on TikTok just to a certain degree. I think the way the algorithm is fueling my creativity, I'm very happy with it. I now follow things which relate to my passion. That comes from marketing strategists who now put out their work there, like Eugene Brandstrat. I really like this guy. He's an Australian guy, and he puts out really good um, commentary on what makes good marketing, and he's just so strong at it. And it allowed me to be exposed to other people within that realm. So I'm leveraging social media not just for stuff that allows me to doom scroll, but I've kind of educated the algorithm to educate me with more within my industry. And again, AI, I'm discovering it more and more. Sounds like I'm just doing too much about it, but the strength of community. Since I moved to Dubai, I established a community with some friends of mine, a football community. They're called Nadi Adi. I'm actually wearing the t-shirt right now. It's just about the idea that we get together to play football and not have any issues. Nowadays, Sunday league, you're afraid if you'll get your leg broken by someone to ag. And so for us, we just want to play with good dudes and go have a conversation with, have a beer with after. And I've learned about the power of community through being involved with one of the earliest communities I was involved with, the ringleaders out of Montreal. I met Ivan, they're such great people. And so, yeah. So in a nutshell, the things that I appreciate a lot more nowadays is how the algorithm works for me to give me what I want on social, how AI is really helping me my day-to-day work and creativity. And at the same time, always remembering that physical IRL exposure to your communities of like-minded people, often with people who come from different walks of life and give you a different point of view, which really adds to your outlook.
100%. Thank you for that, Rami. The final whistle, last section. It's going to be a quick one. It's 7 questions that we ask every guest, quick fire style. So, team sport or solo mission?
Team sport,
Okay. Stadium or TV?
stadium.
Pizza or burgers?
Oh my god, I'm always on the fence. I'm always on the fence because I love pizza, but it's so like, oh god. Okay, say it again, and I'll answer you really quick right now.
Pizza or burger?
Burgers.
Okay. TV show, podcast, or book that you're currently consuming?
TV show, I would say it was Severance. It really hit me.
That's an interesting one. If you weren't in sports, what would you be doing?
I think I'd own my own comic book store.
I'm not surprised. And you would probably throw some sneakers all around the store as well, right?
Yeah.
What's a sports moment that still gives you chills?
I would say The final, actually no, it was the year of the Invincibles, where Arsenal had just gotten knocked out of the Champions League, if I'm not mistaken, and they had to play against Liverpool at home. They were losing 2-1 at the half, I think, and then Henry just blew up, and I remember him carrying the ball just a little bit after the halfway line, and he just glided past everyone, and he, like, completely made Jamie Carragher trip over himself and scored this sublime goal, and I was like, "Wow, this team is not gonna let this in." They may have, dropped out of these cup competitions, but they're not gonna let this season go. It gave me chills because you can take a lot of hits, but you can still get back up. You can still prove something. And they came out as being the only team to ever go a Premier League season undefeated. So it was
Yeah,
beautiful to
yeah.
do that. Even if I was watching every game on TV,
That was a special one, yeah.
Yeah.
And last question, finish the sentence. The sports industry needs more
Morals.
morals.
Yeah. Ethics.
Nice. Morals and ethics. Okay, noted. This is it for today. Thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure to catch up and to hear about your stories. Plenty of learnings, I think, for everyone. So thanks again and speak soon.
Merci à toi. Thank you so much.
And that's it for today's episode of Between the Lines. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed it, make sure to follow and share it with someone who loves hearing honest conversations about the careers behind the game.